I appreciate y'all coming. And we're going to do this free form, so you all just chime in when you want to chime in. What I'd like to do first is maybe have each of you, in effect, introduce yourselves. Talk about a little bit about your background, what kind of work you do at the firm. You know, and Stuart, I know you clerked for a couple of years. You might talk a little bit about that. But I want the students to kind of know who you are before we get into my questions. So, Amy, you want to start?
Okay. I actually graduated from Fletcher in 2012, so I'm not far out. Prior to law school, I actually took 3 years off, and so I worked in an accounting firm as an auditor, and I have a CPA license. So for me, my obvious practice area is tax. I do transactional stuff, so I do probate, estate planning, kind of a support for other areas when it comes to tax stuff. I don't know, that's probably...
Amy's the only one who's a veteran of this class. These other two folks missed it right when you were starting.
My name is Jenny Stansfield. I graduated from Mercer in 2004, so I've been practicing nearly 10 years. I have been at Martin Snow the entire time, so unlike my two attorneys with me here today who've been other places and practiced or worked in other professional areas, I've been at Martin Snow the entire time. I have kind of a different practice. I've more or less 3 different practice areas. The first being business litigation and creditor bankruptcy. I represent a lot of lending institutions in bankruptcy court. The second practice area is divorce and adoption. And the third practice area is probate and estate planning. So it kind of, each day is very different and it puts me all over the map, but it's amazing how many times the 3 kind of intermingle and I can use what I've learned in other areas as an asset.
My name's Stuart Walker, and Jenny and I were classmates in law school, so we've both been out a decade now, which is hard to believe. And I'm glad that Pat said we made the cut to be younger lawyers. That was very flattering of him to include us. So thanks for having us. I graduated and went out to clerk, first for a trial court judge for 2 years, a federal district judge here in Macon, and then for a year on the 11th Circuit. So I'm 3 years behind Jenny in terms of my tenure at Martin Snow. But I've been there, I guess, working on 7 years now. I'm in what the firm calls our business section, and that runs the gamut from litigation to transactional work. And I've got a foot kind of on each side of that divide. I work a lot for our financial institution practice. We represent a lot of community banks. We do a lot of regulatory work, securities compliance issues. When our corporate clients are wanting to sell securities, we do a lot of that kind of work for them. And then I have kind of a litigation support practice where I draft a lot of briefs, handle appellate issues when they arise in the firm, when we get referred matters. I and a couple other people in the firm are kind of our appellate team. So it's a good varied mix, which I think for those of you who wind up practicing in a market similar to Macon, you'll see that that's kind of the nature of anyone's practice. There's no hyper-specialization in a place like this, but it's good because no 2 days are the same.
Well, I would assume that the variety is one of the things that's attractive about it. But, you know, let me ask you this. What is it you like best, or that you find the most enjoyable about your practice? And at the same time, on the flip side, what's the most challenging part of what you do?
I'll take the first crack at it, I guess. The most gratifying thing is just seeing a client's, when a client comes to you for the first time and explains their problem, and they seem to be sort of at the end of their rope. Obviously, by the time they've come to you, they feel like they don't have any other alternative. And for you to help in connection with them and their background and backstory and how they got to where they are, to work out satisfactorily their objectives, whether it's in litigation or whether it's putting a deal together, and they think, you know, we just can't quite bridge the gap between, say, we're representing a seller in a company or something, we can't quite get together on terms, we've done everything we know to do, and then working in connection with maybe their counsel on the other side, and you finally get to that point where a deal is struck and you work it out, and at the closing, you know, everybody's happy and walks away. That the kind of arc from beginning to end, to see the client be satisfied with something you've helped to do, is kind of what it's all about at the end of the day, I think, what makes it worth it. And obviously, good results when you're in litigation or something like that is about the equivalent.
Yeah, having people walk away, everybody walk away happy, that's the language of a transactional lawyer.
That's right.
That's not the language of a litigant.
Which is one thing that's appealing about that, because typically you're putting the transaction together, everybody's happy at the end of the day. Everybody got more or less what they wanted, which is not the case often in litigation. The biggest challenge or most difficult thing, I think, is probably just the business aspect of practicing law, which by and large you're not taught much about in law school. Which is not a fault of the law school. I don't know that it's really designed to do that, but you do pick it up by necessity if you're working in the private sector for sure. But dealing with client demands, you know, their demands on your time, their demands on, you know, how they want to tell you how to work, you know, the case that they've hired you to represent them on, managing billing, keeping up with collections. I mean, all the stuff that I wish I could say was kind of the collateral part of practicing law, but often it's the predominant part if you want to get paid and be productive. But those are the things that you learn just sort of trial by fire, more or less, I think.
And as an associate, I just barely am seeing some of that and realizing how much they have on that. So for me, the most challenging thing was realizing that you often don't know all the facts. As a clerk, I thought that partners were like testing me. Like if they had just told me all these facts to start with, then I would have been much more efficient and I would have given them the answer they needed. And then now being in practice, you just kind of assume there are always facts that you don't know, and there's always something that your client didn't know they should have told you.
Everything that Stuart said was almost exactly what I would have said. The greatest part about practicing law is the people you get to deal with, and sometimes the worst part about practicing law is the people you get to deal with. So it's really a catch-22, and you can't have one without the other. You just have to hope that the people you get to deal with are the asset most days more than the bad.
What's the best thing about what you do, Amy?
Well, I'm a tax geek, so I actually just really like the stuff that I do. So for me, it is, you know, yes, people, but a lot of my work is in my office by myself, and I am a talker and extrovert. It's not that I'm a shy, quiet person, but I actually really like transactional stuff. So for me, when somebody gives me something that to them seems really complicated, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I got this, and I can explain this to you. So for me, it's probably a little more of geeky satisfaction at this point in my career.
Well, that's good to know. I want to direct this one to Jenny and Stuart, because you all are both partners in the firm, young partners. And I'm wondering about that transition from associate to partner. Was that a big change? Was there things that you know, didn't anticipate being different about being a partner as opposed to being an associate?
I think it kind of goes both ways, and I feel like becoming a partner, that you don't all of a sudden, they don't open the door and you see the light. You know, it's kind of a gradual thing that over time, you know, because you come in and you don't want to speak too much, but you don't want to not assert yourself and speak too little. You do start learning so much more of the business aspect, because that's one thing that I really like, but you know, a lot of people don't like, is, you know, you're practicing law, but you're also a business owner. And that law firm is a business. You have to run it like a business. And you have to continually kind of recalibrate yourself to practicing law and doing what, you know, law school trains you to do. But also, like Stuart said, if you're going to make money and you're going to, you know, be able to pay your bills and your overhead, you have to do that business part. And so I feel like becoming a partner has been kind of a gradual thing that over the years, you learn more, you learn how to do it better, you know, you start taking some ownership of the firm, and really just start giving back on the business side and the mentoring side and really the other sides that you don't necessarily think about and don't need to as an associate.
What do you think, Stuart?
I agree. I think ownership is probably a key word. The expectations are greater. Obviously, you come into a partnership and all of a sudden you're now managing more of the client relationship, you're managing more of the bills, you get a lot more say-so about how things are handled, which is nice because it's a sort of a grant of autonomy, which is sort of liberating, but at the same time it can be kind of scary too, because it's a lot of that stuff is up to you. Now, in a firm of our size, we have 20, 25 lawyers. It's nice because you can ask other people who come before. Now, how do you handle a sticky situation with this? But at the end of the day, you may get a lot of guidance, but it's ultimately going to be your decision. And just kind of a funny thing, I remember not 2 weeks probably after I made partner, an older lawyer, another distinguished alumni of this law school, sent me an email, and he said, well, congratulations on your partnership. I heard through the grapevine. He said, now you have the great privilege of working twice as hard and getting paid half as much. And I thought, oh, ha ha. And then about a month later, I sent him an email and said, wow, that was truer than I ever imagined. So anyway, but there are a lot of, I mean, it is, I would say, probably that sense of liberation. I'm now part of what makes this business thrive, and the ability to sort of put your 2 cents in and have people pay attention, I think.
Well, you all became partners in the firm, so you were successful associates in a certain sense, and I'm sure you are a successful associate so far. I'm not sure that phrase means much to first-year law students. I mean, what does it mean to be a successful associate, or how do you succeed as an associate in a law firm?
I think a lot of it is your work product, but one thing that they don't teach you in law school, but you've learned throughout your life, is your personality and whether or not you're a good fit. Every law firm is very different. I can only speak to Martin Snow, but I know that that's one thing that as an associate we always look at is, number one, their work product. Are they present? Are they in the office? It's not just about billable hours, but it is a lot about billable hours. How much work are you putting in? But even if you put in 6 or 8 hours on a project and you come to the partner and give it to them and they can't do anything with it, then those 6 or 8 hours didn't matter. It's really putting the quality into the work that's done, the timeliness, getting projects back on time. And sometimes, I know Amy can attest to this because she does a really good job of it, but when you are giving a task, ask for a deadline, because we're not very good at that, or at least I'm not. And I hear from other people in our firm over the years that we give something and then we fail to set the expectations sometimes because we're already transitioning to whatever we're going to be working on. So get deadlines. Say, when do you want this? If you want it on Thursday, turn it in on Thursday. But make sure it's a good product, so that the partners want to give you more and more and trust you with the projects that they give you.
Some of that goes really well with clerks, your summer stuff too. Coming in, again, there were several times I clerked at Martin Snow, and I have been there the entire time. But even friends that have been other places have said the same thing of, where I'm joking that I felt like I was being challenged. They're busy and they're giving you an assignment. They're not thinking through, I need this in memo form, I need this, so even as a clerk, to be successful in the summer, you want to ask those questions of, okay, what's your timeline? What form do you need this back in? All of those things. Don't be afraid, to ask them, or figure out even with that person how they like questions. There was one attorney that only spoke to me through email my first summer, and so, and there were not any others like that, but I went to talk to her and she said, I emailed you, you can email me back. So, some of those kinds of things you kind of have to figure out, but don't be afraid to ask those same things as a clerk.
And I'd say taking initiative is probably the number one thing. Be interested in the projects, show interest not only in getting good quality work turned around in a timely manner, whatever the deadline is, but also in client interaction. Sometimes a partner will say, well, just get with the client, call them and let them know. And that gets to what Amy's saying. What form do you want a memo? Do you want me just to tell you in 45 seconds what the answer to this is? or do you want me just to call the client and let them know? It just sort of depends on what the task is. But somebody told me one time the mark of sort of, if you're, quote, making it as an associate, is if you have a client interaction, and next time they have a problem, they call you and not the partner. I mean, when you make those kinds of repeated interactions, and that's the way I think, I'm not speaking out of turn to say that Jenny and I have both developed clients that way, that, you know, we're not robbing our partners of clients, but I mean, you just sort of naturally glide into doing, maybe the client has a bunch of different kind of work, and they start sending you this sliver of work because you handled it well in a way that was satisfactory to them, and then you're the contact in the firm for those matters now, while maybe your senior partner still retains overall control of the client. And that's what partners look at is, you know, are our clients happy with the people who are the face of the firm to the public and to them?
Yeah, it's interesting the way you all articulate that. As I told you before we started, Manley Brown was here Friday. And, you know, we talk all semester about mentoring and how important that is. And Manley emphasized that it really is a two-way street. I mean, they're mentoring you, the older lawyers, but they expect something of you, right? I mean, they expect good quality, timely work product, right? I mean, you've got to do your part too. Jenny, one of the things you mentioned, and I would be interested in everybody's reaction to this, was that you expect, you know, as an associate, you succeed more if you're there, you're physically present. Okay? You can bill hours these days from Starbucks, right? You can bill them from home. But being on the premises is important. Tell me why.
You have to think about, you know, we're very mobile. We all can work from home. You know, the three of us work from home. Stuart and I have young children, so sometimes in the afternoons we have to leave early, but we have to still get our work done, so we work late at night. But you have to think about who your senior partners are. They're not mobile, for the most part. They don't take their laptops home and use their Wi-Fi and get on there and, you know, get on the network and draft their briefs at home. They work in the office, and so you kind of have to think about where the other people in your office, where's their mindset? And so oftentimes, their mindset is you come to the office, you do your work, and when you're done with your work, you leave. That's not probably your mindset. That's not our mindset either. But when you're in the office, they know you're working and you're present. So if you were home working just as hard, that perception's not there. And sometimes you have to think about that because perception is reality a lot of times. And so you have to be present so people know you're working hard, because they can't wait till they get that end of the month report and see, oh, you billed 175 hours this month, great job. But if they never saw you, there's a lost connection there. And I think over time there will be some of that to change, you know, as we all get older and we're more adept to that. But especially at present times, it helps to just be present. It also helps when you have a question, because who you need to go ask is there in the office, which is something that I have really enjoyed about being in a firm the size of Martin Snow, is there are other people in that office who know way more than I do, or know something about that specific area of the law that I don't, so I can go talk to them first to kind of get a head start on where I need to be.
Now, these folks, when they become associates, will be trying to impress people like you. Right? I mean, you said this is changing. How much is it going to change? I mean, are they going to need, as they become associates in firms where you all are the mid-level, powerful partners, are they going to need to have that kind of FaceTime on the premises attitude that you have had to have because of the generation that was ahead of you?
I doubt seriously it will be the same. I would say in large part it depends on where you wind up. You've got to get to know the culture of where you work. And if that is just a routine run-of-the-mill thing where everybody is mobile and everybody communicates by texting and emailing, telephone calls, then that's fine and you know you can adapt to that. If it's not, you might chafe against that, but you need to respect it too. And part of it, I think, in large measure is accessibility, just face-to-face accessibility. A lot of times from day-to-day practicing law, fires come up routinely throughout the day. And you might have a senior partner say, client just called, they need an answer to this in 45 minutes. If you're working at home, yes, they could pick up the telephone, but they're not they want to come sit down across from the desk and say, here are the relevant facts, I've gotten started, I found these authorities, run them down, see what it says. I mean, they feel like they can only get that kind of immediacy with you if you're there. And if a partner comes around a couple times and you're not there, you know, you might not be getting the next call to do that kind of work. And that's just the truth of it. But I think that is gonna change. I mean, I have a sense that, I mean, it's already in flux now, but I would just say wherever you wind up, you need to get to know what people expect. And even in a firm of 25 people, you know, it may vary surprisingly from person to person. But I think you need to be sensitive to whatever the expectation is.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, even when you're the one asking the question, it makes such a difference. A lot of times, if I'm going to ask somebody a question, I will have the case law and the statute and whatever I'm looking at, and I have a couple of things that is much easier to put in front of them and say, this is what I'm looking at and this is where I am, versus trying to put it into an email and having to copy and paste and trying to explain stuff where that narrative would be lacking.
Amy, Stuart had said something about, you know, you need to learn the culture of the place. Okay? You're the youngest one here. How do you go about doing it? I mean, how do you go about, and even the individual requirements of the various lawyers? I mean, nobody teaches you that in law school.
No, well.
No, we're on video, so be careful what you say.
Don't name any names.
I'm a big believer of coming in and being like ultra conservative and taking the conservative approach until you figure those things out. Just because I would rather be the clerk who's overdressed, the associate, whatever, who's doing all those things until I figure out what those things are. So this is kind of funny that as a clerk, I wore a jacket every single day. I wore a matching suit Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday when we had casual Friday, I still wore a jacket because I didn't know what partner would let me go to something and to not know. As an associate, I wear cardigans or sweaters a lot more often because I know what my schedule is and those types of things, and I know that, you know, everybody in our office is not in a suit, but coming in not knowing, that was kind of my policy of I'd rather be overdressed or too conservative or too quiet or whatever until I figure each of them out. Asking those questions of their assignments, a lot of times you figure stuff out just from those. You know, when you realize very quickly the difference in personalities or how technical they are about different things. Some of that stuff. In Macon, it's the legal world is still a good old boys network too of, you know, yes, being conservative, but at the same time going to firm events and having fun and taking advantage of any of those times to socialize, to meet them, to get to know them on any other level. I know most of the Macon firms, for clerks in the summer, they do all these little activities, and just going to those, you know, even just getting to see partners interact with each other, you pick up a lot on their personalities and kind of figuring out if it's the right fit.
And so there's two kinds of mistakes you could make. You could show up too conservative, or you could go the other direction. It's better to err in this.
Well, when you're young and you don't know where you're going is the big thing of, you know, I don't get sent very many places. Some of our other associates that are in litigation stuff, it's not odd for somebody to walk in their office and say, I need you to go to a hearing in 45 minutes, an hour, whatever. I need you to walk across the court, to go to the courtroom and do this. I don't have that happen as much. So some of that type of thing is why I say, I always said, err on the conservative side, or those types of things where, you know, you're a partner, you know what your day looks like for the most part, because if somebody shows up, you're going to get one of the associates and send them if you can. So that's why I said for me, it was a matter of be comfortable with that. And, you know, now my practice is not that way. I can only think of a few times when I've been sent, and I've always had some warning. But I know that if you're in litigation, it is not that way. So that's why I say err on the conservative side of to start with.
Well, we've talked about culture, and Stuart and Jenny talked about the business side of that. These are things that you don't learn in law school. Let me ask you, what would you say law school did a good job of preparing you for and what did we not do a good job, in addition to things you've already said? I mean,
Law school.
what good are we?
Law school's focus is, to me, I think it was very much on how to think and trying to make sure that you step back and look at both sides and those types of things. The legal research here is awesome. That is one thing that there have been a couple times where partners
They
have
had their
given
test on Friday.
Okay, as annoying as it is to have to memorize what the indexes are, and you're never going to use that part, but once you get to the point of actually being able to use the system and research stuff, some of these older partners think that you are like just brilliant. I know I've told Stuart there was one time that one of our oldest partners gave me an assignment and I Googled it and then looked something up really quick online, and I mean, he acted like I was just the most intellectual person. And so some of those kinds of things, you know, they're very, very useful. The thing that I would say law school doesn't teach you is how to practice law. The practical classes, I know your third year, you do take classes that are actual, you know, practitioners that try to be much more realistic, but not even knowing, you know, certificate of service and making sure that you enter things to the court properly when you have to record something and you're, you know, all of those types of things. I didn't learn in law school, and my friends did not learn in law school. It was from clerking and asking those questions, because if I have something that goes out, especially, I mean, if I have to file a complaint, file a lawsuit, to start with, you're like, okay, what do I need to do? And guess what? Law school works on what things you need to draft, but like telling you to just call the court and ask the clerk questions. Those kinds of things you didn't get. For me, I think that's probably the fact that they don't teach you how to practice law. And you get a different experience on all of those types of things. Even, you know, they were talking about the business aspect. Where you end up makes a big difference on how fast you learn that stuff and, you know, what all you see as an associate. Because this weekend I had a conversation with a friend that's an associate in Atlanta, and she's been practicing for, I guess, 4 years, and she has never seen, she gets totally different reports than I do at the end of the month. So I get something that shows my hours and my receipts and what was billed and a little more detail for me to learn, you know, pay attention to the tracking, like micromanaging myself, where she told me she sees her hours and she sees what's written off and that's it. So all of it kind of really is determined by where you end up.
I think, and Amy touched on this, I think law school does an excellent job of teaching you the analytical skills that you will use forever. As long as you're practicing law, and really, for those of you who don't practice law, you know, you may practice for a year or two and never practice again because you may go into something else in the private sector, but law school does an excellent job of teaching you those analytical skills, how to read like a lawyer, think like a lawyer, you know, do all of those things. It applies across the board. It's not just when you're at work and when you're practicing law, because when you're reading anything, you're automatically just using those analytical skills that you're taught in law school. And I think those are just absolutely invaluable. Law school does an excellent job of teaching you how to write. Now, when you get out, you know, sometimes the writing, I know I've talked to Stuart about this before, but, you know, especially if doing appellate work, sometimes you spend more time reading the rules and making sure that you're following the rules than you actually do drafting your briefs and doing some of that. But law school does an excellent job of those types of things. I think law school can't really teach you some of the practical of, you know, more of the procedural, how do you file a complaint, you know, or how do you figure out what the filing fees are, or, you know, just some of the day-to-day practical nuances that you have to become accustomed to. I just don't think that law school can teach those. But I think that the things that law school does teach, you know, no, you're not going to be asked, you know, to write out the elements of a contract, ever. But you know them, and so you can think in your mind as you're analyzing something, does it meet that? You know, Does it have the elements of a will? Is it a will? You know, it's all the things that you don't even, you're almost subconsciously using your law school education as you're practicing. Because no one asks you those questions, but you still need to know the things that you learn while you're here.
What do you think, Stuart?
I agree. I mean, I think for what law school is designed to do, this law school does it really well. And I think kind of teaching you to be analytically rigorous is important, because one of the chief things, as I think was mentioned a minute ago, that we look for in new lawyers or people who are clerking, and whether they're going to be possibly a job candidate for us, is really, how is this good? Is this trustworthy? Is there credibility in this? Do I feel like I can trust the conclusion and the analysis, and is it put together in a manner that, you know, satisfies what has been a learned sort of the logical thought process that we're now all accustomed to, that you do so often incorporate just almost at a subconscious level. And I think the law school does a great job of that, but like so many other things, I mean, if you've never bought a car before or a house or anything else, you can read all about it all day, but until you do it, you're gonna make mistakes. I mean, you're gonna wish, oh, I wish I had done this differently in any transaction. Well, practicing law is sort of that on a bigger scale. I filed this in the wrong court. I filed this, you know, with the Secretary of State, and it should have gone to the Department of Banking and Finance. Now it's going to slow the transaction down for 2 weeks. I'll never make that mistake again. I mean, you're going to do that, and that's not something that any educational institution can secure you against, those kind of failures. So part of learning to practice is making those mistakes and learning from them. But with the resources that you've learned, I think you're better equipped to make a favorable impression on an employer or a colleague or opposing counsel. I mean, I've seen lots of times demand letters come across our desk, and we take a look, we research it, write them back, and you never hear from them again. Why? Because you were persuasive in saying, this is a load, you know, go away. And they say, yeah, you're right. And then the client will not pay you any money to pursue this. The other side said it was frivolous.
That's a technical legal term you learned at Mercer.
Yeah, it's employed regularly. No, but so there's any number of things that law school does really, really well, but it just can't, it can't teach you every conceivable thing there is about how to be a lawyer.
Let me shift gears for just a second. I want to make sure I ask this. How do you make sure you balance your lives? And I know you two have young children. I don't know about you.
I'm single.
You're single.
No kids.
That doesn't mean you don't have a personal life.
No.
The practice of law is very demanding if you're going to succeed at it. How do you balance the rest of your life with your professional obligations, especially with the young kids?
I think just making it a priority. I mean, it's like anything else in life, what you make a priority, whether it's exercising or reading or doing whatever, you're going to make sure you make time for it. And if you make your family, your kids, and your spouse and everything a priority, then you're going to work things around to make sure that they fit into the picture. And practicing law is really important, and it puts a lot of demands on your time. But if you're going to be equitable across all the spheres of your life, you're going to make sure there's time for the other people and things that are important. I mean, I would say don't give up hobbies. I mean, when you're in law school, don't quit doing the things you like to do before you came to law school because you think that it's crowded out with work, or you'll be a better law student if you just put all that stuff to the side for 3 years. I mean, that's crazy. The best semesters of my law school career are when I relaxed the most, did the most things outside on the weekends, took the most time off. And I think that was an example going forward in the practice. I think back, you know, the times when I was most fulfilled, most satisfied, did my best work, or the times when I wasn't, you know, freaking out and thinking work is all there is. So I would say, looking back 10 years out, it's important to maintain all the things that made you happy before you came to law school, whatever they are, and continue doing them. And then as your family dynamic changes, you get married, you have kids, all that stuff will be important. And so I think just by prioritizing in that way, you can, as you say, if you need to leave to pick a child up or go to a soccer game or something like that, then you can log on your computer at 10 and say, I'm going to work from 10 to 12 and make up that time. And it'll be worth it. Everybody in your house will be asleep, you'll get more done, nobody will be blowing up your telephone, and but yet you've then balanced both things in a way that, you know, makes you feel better, more fulfilled in every relationship you have professionally and personally, I think.
There's a lot of flexibility, even as an associate. That's one of the things that I guess caught me off guard of getting used to I worked at an accounting firm prior to law school, and if you were gonna be out, you know, you were treated just as if they would a secretary or, you know, any other employee. And at least at Martin Snow, if I have a doctor's appointment, if I need to leave early to go do something with my nieces, you know, all of those things, as long as there basically is flexibility that I can do that. I can come in early, I can stay late, I can make up for it. You know, yes, you have to be in the office, but leaving early one afternoon for something, unless somebody looked for you and, you know, it doesn't happen on a regular basis, there's not a problem with that. And that's something that I guess surprised me a little bit, of the independence of basically make sure if you're working on something for a partner that they know that you're going to be out that day or that something's going on. So not having kids and being single, there's a lot of, well, you know, if I have to have a repairman come to my house, those kinds of things. Clearly I'm the one that has to deal with all of that. However, I also can stay late or can take stuff home and do whatever I need to do to make up for it. So it still is just prioritizing which things you need to get done and when and how to fit them in, where I didn't expect as much of the flexibility as an associate.
I think the work-life balance, I mean, it's like a pendulum. It's, for me, it's constantly swinging, you know, back and forth, way maybe the demands, you know, of my family are more one week versus, you know, work. But I constantly, you can't ever get to a place where you think I'm in a perfect, and maybe when you're single, Amy may say no, but I don't remember those days, and so she can attest to that. But you know, especially once you're married and have children, and especially when they're young, you can't seek out a perfect norm because there is none. It's just kind of a constant pendulum swinging back and forth, and I find myself some weeks working at home, you know, 3 or 4 nights, and not really spending time, you know, with my husband, you know, and so the next week I'm like, no, don't do that. And so I think by being in law school, you're all high achievers, you work hard, you want to be here, and so that drive is automatically in you, and so you kind of have to push yourself back sometimes and say, don't work too much, you know, or just to kind of strike that balance and make sure you are spending time doing the things that you love. If you love to exercise, or you love to paint, or whatever it is, keep those things up, because that's what makes you you. And you're not going to be happy practicing law if you're not doing those things outside of work that really keep you happy, you know, and make you who you really are.
You know, next Monday, these 3 chairs will be up here again, and I'm going to have 3 young Mercer graduates who are in Atlanta practicing law. And I'm going to ask them why Atlanta versus Macon or a town like that. So I'm going to ask you all. You all could have practiced big firms in Atlanta. You could have done anything you wanted to do. Why Macon? Why a town like Macon as opposed to a bigger city, metropolis like Atlanta?
I spend no time in my car. I'm sure that's not the only thing, but I personally love that I say Macon is a big, small town. My commute to work is 2 miles. I can go home for lunch and sit on my couch if I want to, and not have, you know, and have time away from the office, and it's totally different in that regards of, I'm not sure how much flexibility you get, and I'm sure they will tell you next week if you ask them those questions, but I have felt like a lot of my experience has been very specific to Macon, of me saying it's a good old boy network. Most of our partners are very laid back, very easy to talk to, all of those things. It's just a slightly slower pace of life than my friends that live in Atlanta that spend a large part of their day commuting or dealing with the traffic and those types of things.
Well, a little caveat, I'm from Macon, this is my hometown, but I was not at all convinced that I wanted to stay here to start my profession. When I was in law school, I didn't have any sense of staying in Macon or working at Martin Snow. I worked at a law firm in Charlottesville, Virginia, my second summer. It's kind of an accident. I took an unpaid internship with Judge Lawson on the Federal District Court here for 6 weeks, my second summer. And as a result of that, I decided I wanted to pursue a clerkship. I had no clue. I said, people get paid to do this? This is remarkable. Where do I apply? And so I applied to Missoula, Montana, and Asheville, North Carolina, and all over the place. But I landed one here in Macon, which I thought, well, that's not so bad. My family's there, and I'm comfortable with it. I know a lot of people, my friends, people I went to high school with, are moving back here. But I said, it sort of still gives me an out. There's a 2-year commitment, and I thought, well, I'll just see how it goes. Maybe I'll want to stay, maybe I won't. But at the end of 2 years, I know I'll get an opportunity to do something else. And pretty quickly, you know, I realized that this was not only familiar, you know, territory to me and with familiar people, but just it was the right pace, I think is probably the right word. A lot of people I clerked with went on to work, you know, in Chicago or New York or Atlanta, and I just knew that was not something that was going to suit me. Because of what I said, the priorities that were important to me, I felt like would have to be shifted, and it was, you know, I had to look at them with some sense of, wow, you are bringing in, you know, 3 times as much money working at this big firm or wherever, but, you know, they're working for it too. And there are a lot of expectations on you in exchange for that, which I just made a personal choice was not worth it to me. And my wife, who I met after I clerked, is from a small town in Georgia, and there's no way she was moving to Atlanta, so that played probably some role.
Should have started there.
Yeah, maybe that probably should have started and ended there. But at any rate, it was kind of accidental. I kind of backed into it. But when I interviewed at Martin Snow, they were hiring someone to do the kind of work that was appealing to me. They had a person who needed to do transactional work, heavy into regulatory stuff, and the banking sector was appealing. I didn't know a thing about it, but I was very interested to pursue it. And so, you know, don't ever turn your back on fortuity. I mean, a lot of things are just happy accidents that turn out to be the best decisions you ever accidentally make. That's how I wound up where I am, extremely happy, but not at all sort of with any foresight.
Kenny, why Macon?
I have a similar caveat. My husband is from Macon, but I'm originally from Kentucky, so coming down here was kind of a great leap of faith. You know, I remember coming in the first day of law school and not knowing an entire soul in this entire building, which was a little bit daunting. But I kind of knew from the beginning I wanted to be in Macon. He wanted to be in Macon, so we were agreed to be in Macon. But I agree with what Amy and Stuart both have said. You know, the pace is right for me. It's not as slow as some other towns, and sometimes when things are just going crazy at work, you kind of wish maybe you were a little further down in South Georgia where things are just a little bit slower than they are here, or they seem that way. But I knew a lot of people in our law school class, you know, and I kind of followed them over the years when they went to Atlanta and working 6 days a week. And I'll be the first to admit, I worked a lot of Saturdays as an associate, but I worked Saturday mornings. I didn't work Saturday full day suit, you know, just like it was a Monday. And that just wasn't what I wanted. I just didn't like that pace. It didn't suit me. I didn't think that I would be happy doing that. In Martin Snow, again, when I was starting, they were looking for, when I first started, I did exactly what Amy's doing now. And over the years, I've added the other practice areas because that's what the firm needed. And this is a little different than what Professor Longman asked us, you know, to say, but one thing when you're out practicing, be willing to take on those extra projects. You know, if a partner comes in and says, you know, we need this area because we just took on a big client who has these needs, you know, I wouldn't be doing bankruptcy work right now if it wasn't for some of those big clients, and I absolutely love it. And I would have never known, I didn't take any bankruptcy classes in law school, but I really like, you know, the creditor side of the bankruptcy practice.
Along the way, you all have already answered mostly with what's always my last question, which is what advice do you have for the students? So what I'd like to do is turn it over to them for a few minutes, see what questions they have for you. I've got some, I have more on my list, but I wanted to make sure I saved some time since so many were eager to have younger lawyers come. Yes, Stuart, you do qualify.
Just made
What questions do you all have for our guests this morning? Yes, sir.
this may not apply, but how exactly, for Stuart and Jenny, how do you determine what type of work you assign to associates? Or is that something that you two even do? I mean, it may not apply, I'm sorry.
I give associates a lot of work. And, you know, we have several associates in our firm, and depending on what the work is, it really classifies who I give it to. You know, if it's more of a transactional thing, or it's probate or estate planning related, well, then Amy's always gonna get it. But if it's more of a litigation, you know, we actually have two guys who are associates that I give a lot of the litigation things to. And it just kind of depends on how complex it is, how quickly I need it, and just what fits them, more or less. I mean, I really just kind of look at what is the project, what do I need from it, what area of the law is it, and that's how I pick who.
You usually end up in a department as an associate. Some of us, like I knew what I was being hired for. I have friends that were at Atlanta firms where they hired a set number and then they assigned them to a department after they saw who accepted. So usually you're in some type of practice area.
I usually, it depends to me on who the client is, how fast do they need it, and how much do they want to pay, and is it something I already know the answer to. I mean, sometimes you'll want to give something to an associate who you're sort of training and mentoring in your field so that they can, you know, figure out how to unravel, you know, this maze, or how to get through to the answer that you've looked at 1,000 times. And if the client's not in a particular hurry, and you know that, you know, it may take them more time than is necessary, but you can adjust that. That goes back to sort of the practice of law. You might have to adjust a bill to account for the fact that maybe that associate had a lot of learning curve built into that. But if it's something they need immediately and they don't want to pay, you know, but for 10 minutes of your time and I can open right to it, I'm not giving that out. So, but if it's a long-term sort of research-based thing where I think there's good room for, you know, future growth and learning in an area, then, but it's, you know, there's no real magic to that. It sort of depends.
What else? What other questions? Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Are you, any of you, looking for another job? I know in some industries, if you're in a place more than 5 years, your raises stop because you're afraid to move. But I kind of don't sense that going on in your firm, or maybe even in the entire lawyer business. I was just wondering, are you always looking for another opportunity, or are you happy to stay where you are?
Well, we don't have set raises, first of all. I wish we did. No, I say that I'm perfectly content with where I am because I like what I do. And so I don't know that, maybe this is not quite like other industries in that sense, and maybe this market is a little different than other bigger legal markets and other bigger firms where there is this constant movement. I mean, in the last 20 years, I mean, it's not uncommon for people to go out sort of raiding departments at big firms. We're going to take this partner and his 5 colleagues because we want to start this practice. And so people are always jockeying to come in at a higher level or come in at equity partner from one firm to the next and that sort of thing. You don't see that as much in a town like this, I think, by and large, because that's a different model altogether. Our firms aren't sort of playing that game with other firms in town. And also, I think people are, by and large, happy with what they're doing. I mean, not everybody all the time is, but for the most part, I think they are. And two, I think the level of just sort of, it's a little bit less of that cutthroaty mentality. It's a level of collegiality. We haven't talked about that, but I mean, working in a place like Macon, where you're going to go toe-to-toe with somebody in court, and 10 minutes later you might be at the Rookery having a beer with them, you're going to treat that person differently, just by necessity, than you are if the only communication you ever have is by email, and it's always tense, and it's always, you know, sort of hard-nosed and edgy. You don't have that down here, and I think that is why a lot of people aren't on the look, you know, all the time to try to get away from that, because it just, by and large, doesn't exist. It's my experience.
I know exactly what you're talking about because my husband works for AT&T, and, you know, within his division, every 3 years you're either moving up or out, you know, and that's just kind of the mentality. And it took me a while to kind of get used to that, like, wow, people are changing jobs all the time. There's so much turnover, but a lot of it is people going up, you know, and the people who can't cut it go out. And I feel like Macon, and especially me, I'm the exact opposite. Like, I've been at Martin Snow 10 years, planning on being there until I'm lucky enough to retire. And I'm not looking to go anywhere, but I think the most important part about that is, you know, working with people that you like and that you get along with, and the personalities, but also doing what you like. And you have the ability to change your practice areas, or, you know, diversify them more in a town like Macon, you know, or in a smaller town than you do maybe, you know, in Atlanta or New York, Chicago, where you're in an actual practice group. And I would be interested to see next Monday how the Atlanta attorneys could answer that, because they may be able to switch between practice groups if they just decide, you know, secure transactions just isn't really, you know, or, you know, banking institutions is not their thing, and they want to switch to litigation, how they could do that.
I think most of my friends that are in Macon, we are with places that we started and clerked, and we stayed, and we feel both invested in our offices and we feel invested in, if that makes sense, of, they have taught me a lot, they are still teaching me a lot. There's been, there's something about that, if that makes sense, that most of the people that I know, that are moving or have moved, it's because they haven't found their good fit yet, not because of just, oh, it's time to move on.
Time for maybe one more. We give you all the last word. Any last words of wisdom for them? This is mostly first-year students with a handful of transfer students, but they're early in their law school career. 30 seconds of each. Words of wisdom.
It only lasts 3 years. Make the most of it. I know you think it's never going to come, but in reality it's going to go by quicker than you think. So I had already said this, but I'd echo it again. Take full advantage of the freedom and the flexibility and the time you have now to pursue these other things, and find out what it is that in 10 years is going to continue to make you happy. Don't freak out too much. I know, that's easy for us to say, right? We've already been through it. But this is not the end-all be-all. It's just the beginning, so just enjoy it. I'd give anything to be back in law school right now. I'd gladly switch places with you.
I think the one thing, and even Stuart and I have talked about this a lot, is I didn't feel like I fully optimized all of my time in law school. You think you don't have a lot of time right now, you have an immense amount of time. Use it. Have fun, do the things that you enjoy. Obviously study too, make good grades, but there's plenty of time for the school and all those outside activities. If you want to learn how to play golf or tennis, you can perfect it in law school, and I suggest that you do that. So you can play it when you get out practicing, but don't worry too much about what comes after graduation. All of that will come as it goes. Be willing to change, be willing to adapt, and be willing to be mentored, and look for that. Seek out, when you start somewhere, seek out that one person, two people that you can go to and just ask any question in the world. There'll be some that you can't really approach, but find someone who wants to invest in you, and you can also invest in them, and that will be remarkable for you, and it will be an invaluable experience once you're actually out there practicing.
Yeah, I had a friend when I started law school that was already an attorney, and she told me to make sure that I enjoyed those naps. She was like, get in as many naps as you can, because you will never again. That we joked about that people had perfected the go home in your hour between classes and get a nap. So you do have way more time than you will later. My other thing would be take advantage of doors that open. If you reach out to somebody and they give you advice, at least attempt to follow through on, things, those types of stuff. A lot of things in my career have been a door was open and I just took advantage of it, or was in the right place at the right time. So, take advantage of those things.
All good advice. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.